Employee engagement is the emotional commitment an employee has to the organization and its goals. Kevin Brose said that once. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast, episode 53, Enabling Employee Engagement with Joe Dodds. Hey everybody, welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. It's your host and founder again, Scott McCarthy, and welcome one, welcome all. If it's your first time listening or your 53rd time listening, thanks to you, because you guys are the reason why this show exists in the first place. And if this is your first time listening, you're probably wondering what we're all about. Well, it's pretty simple, right? There are just simply too many bosses out there in today's day and age. Too many people who think simply yelling, barking orders, fist pounding, and just thinking that they can just simply say, do this, and that's good enough for today's day and age as being in a leadership role. In fact, that's not even being a leader, period, right? It's just being a boss. And the goal of the show is this: to make better leaders, to help you become a better leader. And I do that in a couple ways. I do it by grabbing my 20 odd years of leadership experience, with the bulk of it coming from my time in the Canadian Army, to going out and grabbing world-class guests like today's guests, such as Joe, and extracting their knowledge, their tips, their advice, their practical guidance on how we all, me included, can be better leaders. So hope you enjoy that. Before we dive into today's episode and talking about employee engagement, just a couple things to run by you. First off, I want to do a shout out to the show sponsor, Penji. If you're a leader, and especially if you're a leader of a small business, small organization, you don't have enough time to be worrying about graphic designs or flyers, pamphlets, all those types of things. And that's where Penji comes in. Penji is a sponsor of the show. If you check out, the various artwork on the social media, that was all done by Penji, right? The great team over there. Absolutely love Jonathan and his crew for what they do. So it's pretty simple. If you check the show notes, you will see a coupon code in there that will save you $35 a month, every month, for as long as you are a subscriber to Penji's services. So check them out at penji.co, penji.co, and use the coupon code MFL10, or check it out in the show notes if you happen to forget later on. All right. And the second announcement I want to run by you is the Moving Forward Leadership Mastermind. It's a Facebook group where we talk leadership, and I invite all of the guests. All the guests get invited. Not all of them are in there because, actually not all of them are on Facebook. It's really neat. That's where we have our leadership discussions, okay? And you can shoot me questions in there. I'm there posting daily, all right? So that's pretty well all I got to say about that, all right? If you want to check it out, just go to movingforwardleadership.com/mastermind, and that will quickly flick you over to the Facebook group where you can simply ask to join. So let's talk about employee engagement, shall we? Employee engagement is actually one of the hardest things to do as a leader, believe it or not. Actually get your employees engaged, involved, willing to go that extra mile for the organization. Okay? It is absolutely probably the hardest thing you will have to do. And Joe, she's got a background in HR, digital, social media. She works with business owners and leaders to help their personal productivity and well-being, and also to help them improve their employee engagement. So when Joe reached out to me, I listened to what she had to say, and I was like, wow, definitely need to get her on the show. Pretty funny. She is from the UK, so we actually recorded this significantly late at night for her. Won't take away too much of the show's thunder. And we also did have a couple of hiccups here and there, which will be discussed throughout the show. But I edited everything. It is sounding great, so you don't need to worry about that, okay? Anyway, that's all I got for you today. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode talking employee engagement with Joe Dodds. Joe, welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Scott. It's great to be with you.
So you now take officially the title of the person up the latest to be interviewed on Moving Forward Leadership. Congratulations.
Thank you. Not that I've done anything, of course.
It's what, 1:45 a.m. there?
No, 1:45. So
quarter to one. Sorry.
Not so bad.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I said to you, I'm quite a night bird normally, but for some reason, the last week I've been going to bed at reasonably early times and getting up early. So this is more of a challenge than it normally would be, but hopefully I'll sound, enthusiastic and wide awake.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. It's awesome. So what I'd like to do with all my guests is trying to get them to give a background, a bit of brief background about themselves, who they are, how they got to where they are today, just so that the audience has understand, and we can dive in talking about the leadership topic.
Yeah, lovely. Okay. So I'm Joe Dodds, and I live in the UK, as we've vaguely alluded to. And my background is retail HR. I did nearly 20 years in various regional and national roles in mostly retail, a bit of leisure. And then I started my own business 12 years ago, really just so that I could stay at home and have a child. And I have an 11-year-old little Doddsy, so that worked fine. But I didn't actually stay in leadership or HR. I did publishing. I helped small businesses with online marketing. I specialised in social media when that came along. And then 5 years ago, I realised that social and digital tools were going to be much more important within organisations. And so I started to look back towards the corporate space, and very quickly, just by chance, got involved with a national movement in the UK called Engage for Success, which is all about spreading the word about employee engagement and shining light on good practice. So I started working with them as a volunteer, and then as a retained part of the core team. And as a result, I ended up specialising in employee engagement with a specialism in social and digital tools. And now I also focus on well-being and productivity. I think in these days of digital overwhelm and all the sort of notifications and stuff that's happening with all the sort of email and that sort of thing, well-being is a really important thing for individuals and for people within organisations. And so, there's quite a good connection between the engagement piece and, working with individuals around their well-being as well. So quite an eclectic background, and I split my time now between working with individuals, as I say, around the productivity piece, and working with large organisations running things like engagement workshops, leadership training, action learning, and that sort of thing as well. So fairly varied.
Wow, that's like a super in-depth background, which definitely shows you have the foundation to talk about what we're going to talk about today or tonight, this evening. Anyway, and that's mainly employee engagement, right? That's what we're going to hover around.
Yeah.
So for you, what does it truly mean to have employee engagement, in your own words?
So for me, there's so many definitions of engagement within organisations, and in fact, when David McLeod and Anita Clark, who founded our movement in the UK, did research which originally kicked off the movement, they discovered something like 55 different definitions of it. So,
just one or two, right?
Exactly. But they came up with one which I use when I do my training for a particular reason. And I don't know it perfectly. It's on a slide somewhere, but it's around having objectives for the organisation that your employees fully understand and are committed to and motivated to achieve. But the bit that I like and I think is vital is whilst maintaining a sense of their own well-being. So that sort of fits with what I was saying earlier about well-being. But, if you say this is what we're doing as an organisation and this is what we expect our people to do, and they have to do that regardless of how they feel about it or regardless of their own well-being when they're at work, then, to me, that doesn't end up with them being engaged. There was quite a bit of backlash around engagement a few years ago where people talked very much about well, it's about discretionary effort. It's about getting people to do, more for less, or, to work for nothing, basically, to do unpaid overtime and prove that they're committed to the organisation. And sometimes that does happen. Sometimes people do go over and above what they are expected to do, but they're doing that because they want to, and it makes them feel fulfilled in their role. And that, for me, is the bit that really sort of proves that engagement, that that it's about them as well as the organisation.
So 50 odd definitions of employee engagement kind of, shows the paradox of leadership in general, and that, what's a definition really, and, what's best practice, and you kind of can't pick up with the one thing, right?
No.
So just moving along, I think the next thing which I'd like to hit on would be, how can employers and leaders get their employees engaged with the organization, what they're doing, and so on and so forth?
Mm-hmm. So when, as I said, David and Nita did the research, they wrote a report called Engaging for Success, which is otherwise known as the McLeod Report. And to do that, they travelled around organisations in the UK looking at where they were really engaged and organisations where there was less engagement. And they basically came up with what we call the 4 enablers, which were 4 areas that were really strong in the organisations where engagement was high, and not so strong in the areas where engagement, was low. And for me, they're not a model as such, but they really help you to position and think about how to engage your people. So we can talk through each of those if you'd like. Absolutely.
So what would be the first one?
So the first one is about having a really strong strategic narrative. So that's about being really clear about where your organisation's been, where it is now, and where it's going. But crucially, it's about being able to connect those individuals, those employees, with that narrative in terms of how it affects them. So that every day when they come in to work, they can see that what they're doing is actually having an impact and helping to move the organisation forwards towards, whatever the future looks like. And, I use an example that I always think everybody has heard of, and it may even be a story and not true, but it's a good example, which is the janitor, the cleaner at NASA, when Kennedy visited the Space Center in the 60s, being asked what he did there, what his role was. And he didn't say, I clean the toilet or the floor or whatever. He said, I'm helping to put a man on the moon. So he could see the bigger picture of what the organization was doing, and he could see the role he played, the part he played in getting that to happen.
That's awesome. That's a awesome example, and it's so often that I find people just don't necessarily see that bigger picture, and it could, there's multitude of reasons for it, but probably most prominent is because the leadership has a hard time in actually passing that bigger vision down and communicating it down to their people.
Exactly. And also, quite often when I go to work with organisations, I get asked to talk to sort of the middle management level, and sort of immediate pushback is, well, it's all well and good telling us all this stuff, but, it's the people above me, our senior team, our senior leaders don't, create this narrative for us, don't, whatever the other examples might be. And, a lot of the discussion becomes around, well, actually, you can only deal with the bit that you can deal with. You can't influence the whole organisation. You can try, and you may have some impact, but ultimately, the only bit you control is the bit that you have control over. Sounds a bit simple and logical.
Yeah.
And actually, even if your whole organisation is not clear about their strategic narrative, and they're not clear enough to explain it to you, so that you can, repeat that to your team, you still can create a narrative for your own team based on what you think they need to be doing. And you can still make it meaningful to them, so that when they come in to work, the things that they do with you are part of that sort of narrative, even if it doesn't quite fit with the, the total organisation. Obviously, that's the best scenario. But just because your whole organisation hasn't quite got there with their narrative doesn't mean that you as a team can't create your own, because otherwise what are you all going to do, come to work and not be engaged and hate it, and do the same as the leader?
Absolutely. Yeah, strategic narrative is definitely key in my mind, and something that we definitely push on in the Canadian Army, and making sure that greater vision is understood by all, for sure.
Mm.
Doesn't necessarily mean it happens all the time, but we definitely, for me, I definitely do my bit. So, what would be the next enabler?
So the next one's about having engaging managers, and that's broken down into three areas. So that's firstly being a leader who can connect your people with that strategic narrative. So as we've already said, so that's one bit of it. Secondly, it's about treating people as individuals. And I talk very much about remembering that people are different. So my daughter used to come home from school and say, our head teacher says that we should treat everybody as we would like to be treated ourselves. And I always used to say to her, that's not true. I don't agree with that. And of course, she'd get all wound up because, the head teacher is really important and far more trustworthy than mummy, obviously. But what I was trying to instill in her was actually, it's not treat everyone as they would like, as you would like to be treated. It's treat them as they would like to be treated. So, how I like to be treated is different to how you like to be treated. So if I did everything on the basis of what I would want, that may not work for you. Now, obviously that phrase is supposed to be, just be nice to people, isn't it? That's where it's come from. But, the reality is in a team of, 3, 5, 10 people, you will have, potentially 3, 5, 10 different sort of needs, different ways of wanting to interact. And you need to understand that to be able to lead and manage those people well. And another example, when I first started in my HR career, I worked for a supermarket company, and my store manager was, I now realise, really competitive, which is, I think, quite common amongst retail managers. And he used to come and challenge me. So he'd give me some good feedback about something, and then he'd say, but if you did this, and if you hadn't have done that, and he'd get really quite sort of aggressive about it. And I tend to be, if people are like that and quite competitive, I'm a bit like, okay, well, whatever, because it's not really how I am. And I didn't realise until sort of recent years, again, having looked at my daughter and how she responds to situations, what actually motivates me is recognition, much more than competition. And yet he was treating me as if I was the same as him, so that, I needed competition and really sort of riling up, geeing up to get going on stuff. And actually, if he'd really, given me a lot more recognition and compliments on the stuff that I was doing well, I'd have worked better, with that. Not to say that I didn't do a good job and we didn't get on well, because I did, but, I look back now and think actually he missed a trick, because there was a lot more he could have probably got out of me if he'd responded in a different way. But it was hard for him because that wasn't what he would have wanted. So the second one's about treating people individually, and then the third one is about coaching people regularly. And I think we tend to sort of think that coaching is something that's quite it's going to take time. It's but we sort of tend to think it's about monthly reviews or annual reviews, or really having to sort of set aside time to spend one-to-one time with our people. But actually, it's just having quick conversations. David McLeod, as I said, our co-founder, he talks about you get what you walk by. As in, if you just let people get on and do their own thing and don't pull them up on it at all, unless because you're waiting for that next formal time to talk to them, then they'll keep doing things in a way that you don't want them to, because you haven't actually said anything to them. So just picking up small conversations at appropriate moments with everybody is a much better way of building that relationship with your people, but also sort of guiding what they need to be doing, on a regular basis. So it's three things. It's the connecting people with a strategic narrative, it's treating people as individuals, and then it's regularly coaching them.
No, there's a couple great nuggets in there for sure. And we talked about, we kind of hit the strategic narrative, but for the second one, it's basically all about knowing your people. And that's one of the cornerstones of leadership, is knowing your people and how they respond to things and what they respond well to, and so on and so forth, which is, crucial in my mind. And the second thing is, it's easier to make minor adjustments more frequent than it is to make a major adjustment once every month or multiple months or twice a year or something like that. And I think a lot of people don't realize that, right?
No, exactly. And, a lot of the big organisations now, like Deloitte and so on, are getting rid of their performance review processes because they've sort of realised that, well, not sort of, they have realised that those processes aren't actually working for them. And a lot of it is because of that. It's because people don't have those regular conversations. They sort of, put them off or make little notes ready to bring up at the end of the year. And by that by that time it's too late, and it does nothing to, develop that trust between leaders and their people, because people don't trust that process or those conversations because they feel a bit hard done by. You can't ever really remember back to the detail, and people are giving you feedback on stuff that you can't really remember, and and also it's sort of. I was thinking, we should be real people, and real people don't wait. Well, unless maybe it's your husband or your wife, and you're bearing a grudge after months and months about the washing up that doesn't get done or whatever. But we tend to be in the moment. We have conversations in the moment about things because that's what we need to do to get stuff done. So to build a formal process that actually means that you only have this conversation once every however long, just you can see why it doesn't work.
Yeah, no, 100%. And the reality is, after a while, the system, the organization, I should say, learns the system, learns how to play it, and all of a sudden, then the validity of the evaluation program goes out the window anyway, because people suddenly start working and developing themselves towards doing those various checkboxes that are on the performance reviews anyway. So.
Yeah,
and that's where we're kind of at in my organization now. They're supposed to come up with a new one, and we keep hearing very near future. This is the last time we're doing the old one. So that's great. We talked about strategic narrative. We talked about being an engaging manager. So that's halfway there. What's next?
Okay, yeah. So the third one's about enabling employee voice.
Oh, okay.
So that, for me, it isn't just about asking your employees for their opinions. It's actually getting them involved in the setting of the objectives, in the strategy, and in that narrative for the organisation. And so, a lot of organisations do engagement surveys, and they, ask for views and get all their stats, and they're very proud of the fact that they get that feedback. But then quite often what they do is they go away. Well, firstly, some organisations do nothing with the feedback, so nothing changes.
Yeah, that's great news.
Secondly, some go away and do what they think the employees want with the feedback. So, in the UK, the supermarket company Tesco had a thing for their customers where it was "you said, we did." So they put all these reports on the wall, which basically said, the customers complained about this, we've resolved it by doing that. So, you said, we did. And for me, if you do that, some organisations use that as part of their employee voice, and it can work well. But it's really only the beginning, because actually it should be "we said, we did." So, as an organisation, this is where we have issues, and as an organisation, this is what we're going to do to change it. Because quite often, if you run away as a manager to try and resolve all this stuff for your employees, you make all these changes and then come back and find out actually that wasn't what they meant. Because, it's all about interpretation, or open to interpretation. Yeah. And so, true employee voice is about getting the employees involved right from the beginning in actually identifying the things that need to change and helping to change them, as a team. And there's, again, loads of examples of, I interviewed somebody from one of the NHS trusts over here, which is the hospitals, and they've not got enough money. Their budgets are going down rather than up, so they're having to, work with even less resources and provide even more services. And, some of them are really struggling, and some of them are actually doing really well. And the one that I interviewed, he said, the real turning point for us was we basically, all of us, from the really senior person right through to the most junior person, sort of got together and acknowledged that it's all a bit rubbish. We've not got enough money. We're going to have less money next year, but we have got to provide all these services. And then we sort of agreed as a team that we were going to work together to do as much as we could, the best we could with what we had, to make that happen. And that, for them, was a sort of a pivotal change in how they worked with their team, and actually meant that they've been really successful because everybody is involved in that change, not, the senior people worrying that they need to do X, Y, and Z, and the more junior people blaming the senior people for the fact that there's no money or whatever. They are, as a whole organisation, just working under very challenging conditions and doing a great job of it.
No, it's awesome. And that goes, to me, in my mind, goes right along the lines of my consistent and constant message about how delegation is a power multiplier, right? And it's the same type of thing. You're enabling everybody from top to bottom for this movement of change, and giving them the tools to get the job done. So, no, I love it. And it truly does make employees more engaged with an organization because suddenly they have a part to play in advice being told what to do all the time, right?
Absolutely. And, we always say as well, when you ever hear any issues in organizations, where there's been a big, publicity, PR issue because there's been something terrible that's happened, that, we say somebody always knew, and if only they'd listened to those people, then it wouldn't have happened, or listened and done something with them.
For sure.
Because people do know, and also people quite often at the front line. I chaired a conference last week, the National Housing Federation, and there was an organisation there who are trialling self-managing teams. So they're frontline staff who work with people who need social housing are actually not working with managers anymore. They're actually making their own decisions and, delivering a service without being able to really, defer that decision making to other people because they've been empowered to make those decisions themselves. And the chief executive was just saying how, amazingly powerful it's been because, and how, I was going to say simple. Is that one of those things where it's, simple but not easy, or easy but not simple? Can never remember which way around it goes. It's fairly sophisticated for them to have done it. But of course, the people who are now making decisions and running the teams are the people in the teams who know the best thing for the end customer. So it's giving them so much more empowerment within their organisation, and they're much more engaged because they've got that extra responsibility. But actually, of course, it's working because they do know what they're doing, funny enough.
No, it's awesome. I love it. I've always preached delegation and empowerment and all those things because it gives the employees a sense of ownership in the organization, the problems that you're facing, the solutions that you're implementing, and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. So I think we've talked about that one a fair bit. So what's the final one, the final enabler?
The final enabler. So that is sort of what creates that cohesion, or is the example of the cohesion, which is organisational integrity. So it's not that you end up with all these wonderful values on the wall that say, this is how we do things around here, but actually the reality is that that's not how we do it around here because, everyone knows that. And not only employees, if you've really got that issue where, you're sort of kidding yourselves that you're a great organisation, with lots of integrity, but you're not. Your customers know it too. I'd share an example of being in a pub, so a bar over in the UK, and waiting to be served. It was a really messy pub. It wasn't very clean. There was no one at the bar. I'd been waiting ages, and whilst I was standing there, I could see a sign at the back of the bar on the wall, which was the company values. And I was just laughing to myself as I read these values, thinking, well, if those values were truly in place in this organisation, I wouldn't be standing here reading them because I'd have been served by now. So, it's not just about employees, not feeling that the organisation is in integrity. It's actually, the customers pick that up too. And, a lot of the scandals that we hear with, the big organisations, it's caused by that. It's saying one thing and doing something else and having that say-do gap, as we call it.
No, it makes absolute sense. And personally, I'm a big auto enthusiast, and I can't think of anything bigger than the big Volkswagen Dieselgate scandal, right?
Yes.
And we actually personally owned one of the affected Jetta TDIs. So I went through this quite intensely. Well, I won't even go down the road of what I think about the deal and all this jazz. But what I would say is, here they are pushing values of clean, environmental friendly, blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, on the other side of the coin, they were purposely building code to cheat.
Yeah.
And then push out these vehicles which were polluting the air, I think like 100 times more than what it was acceptable. It was insane.
And you know what's interesting is I've done some work with the financial services part of that organisation in the UK in the last couple of years, and we were talking values. So what Volkswagen do in the world is that they have a base set of values, but they let each country develop the behaviours to explain the values so that culturally they can be different and flexible from country to country. And so one of the roles I had was to go and facilitate some workshops around the values in the UK. And it was after the scandal. And of course that did come up because, you won't be surprised to hear a lot of their employees, were as traumatized as everyone else.
Yeah, for sure.
And again, it goes back to what I was saying, about somebody always knows, that there was a lot of real commitment to the organisation and to the organisational values, and some real emotional sort of trauma, if you like, in what happened. And we were past it by then, so obviously things had started to resolve, and the PR had improved and all that sort of stuff. But it was interesting how emotionally affected the employees were, because they are really connected with the organisation, and it's a really strong organisation in so many ways. So it was probably even worse for them to go through that, having believed the integrity at the time. So, interesting.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I as a customer, and this was our second vehicle, and we were thinking about the third because we were planning on upgrading to an SUV. By the way, we bought a Ford Volkswagen. But I can only imagine that, a lot of those employees who truly bought into those values and were completely engaged with the company felt betrayed, right? Here they are, bought into all this organizational values and was promoting it, no doubt, on, as they were at home or with their coworkers, with their friends, their family, and all suddenly it's like, we actually don't think that way.
Yeah.
By our actions.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's definitely, we could easily have another podcast episode just discussing the whole Dieselgate scandal, because I have some intense viewpoints, but potentially.
I was supposed to say the people I met were really nice.
Yeah. No. And it's, I never took anything on any individual, because the dealers were affected just as bad as what I was affected by, right? So when we dropped it off, we returned it, had them buy it back from us. I didn't have any harsh words for any workers there. They're just doing their job, right? From the Ford organization as a whole. But anyway, that's a great tangent conversation to slowly start wrapping up here. So just to recap, overall, when we're talking about employee engagement, the four enablers being strategic narrative, making sure you got that clear vision, and that's pushed out there. Engaging manager in those three methods that we discussed. Enabling your employees to have a voice within the company as a whole, the organization as a whole. And then finally, organizational integrity. Don't go cheating your customers. Got it. Is there anything else that you would like to add to all that?
I just think engagement is something we've talked about a lot for a long time, and we've called it lots of different things. 18 years ago, I was working with a big DIY company over here, and we were using the Gallup Q12, and employee engagement was like the thing. We lived and died by our engagement results at the time. And then I went off and left HR for, a number of years, came back to find the, Engage Success movement was being launched in 2012. And it was apparently the next big thing. So I was a bit like, 12 years ago was when I was talking about it before, and now it's apparently the next big thing. But, we talk about, motivation and, leadership and, loads of different words and concepts for really describing the same thing, which is people, coming to work and enjoying coming to work and doing a good job, and the organisation's been successful as a result of the efforts of the whole organisation, regardless of the level of people. And, it's great that we talk about it more, and that we've got lots of resources and lots of case studies and lots of information to share to help people to improve how they lead and improve engagement within organisations. But I still don't think we're anywhere near where we need to be. And it comes down to that bit that leadership is difficult. And, I think our leaders increasingly in this day and age of transparency and, issues around trust that we've just touched on already, unintentionally, that emotional intelligence and resilience are just so important in our leadership in order to engage people and in order to make our workplaces great places to be. And, we've got a way to go yet for sure. But, things like this podcast and all the conversations that we're all having, all the time is surely, going to be helpful. But, we're not there yet, are we?
But it's funny. There's nothing new about this. So let's be honest, right? It's nothing new. It's just for some reason it takes a lot of work and a lot of time, and because there are constantly new leaders coming into organizations, it's reinventing the wheel every day.
Well, our exec director Kathy Brown, a good friend of mine, always goes to places and they talk about what's the thing? Is it new wine in old bottles? That is the phrase. And she always goes,
I like that one.
What are you on about? Well, she always goes, what are you on about? It's not new wine in old bottles, it's old wine in old bottles. So there's nothing new about this stuff at all. We just, keep talking about it in different ways, but it's the age old challenge, and we just have different lenses, if you like, as society and business changes, but it's still the same stuff, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, Joe, as we wind down, I got one final question for you, which you probably may be ready for, but that is, in your mind, what makes a great leader?
Well, I just touched on it. I think great emotional intelligence and resilience, I think are really key skills to have. And going back to one of the enablers, it's the bit about treating people as individuals, letting people bring their whole selves to work, and really, working with people on a level, at the same level, I think, without hierarchy, to make it a great place to work and to do the things that we need to do in our organisation.
Awesome. Love it. Joe, again, thanks for coming out to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast, talking to all the audience out there. If they want to learn more about you, your organization, what you do, how can they find you? Where can they reach you? Where are all your resources? Feel free to give yourself a shameless plug to Mike's yours for another 30, 45 seconds as you see fit.
Lovely, thank you. So my website is engagementandwellbeing.com. And if you go to engagementandwellbeing.com/downloads, then you can get, amongst other things, a 4 enablers checklist, which will enable you to think about how your organisation fits against those enablers, or how you as a leader as well do. So that's me, and I'm on social media as well. If you just go to Google and look up Joe Dodds, you'll find me. And if you're interested in the resources that Engage for Success have, they're all free. There's lots of reports and evidence and videos and tons of information, 250 radio podcasts. Then just go to engageforsuccess.org and you can get to see all what's there.
Awesome. And for the audience out there, keep making it easy for you guys. If you just go movingforleadership.com/5353, that's where you're going to find all the show notes for today, and all those links will be right in there. So stick by, because I'm going to have my key takeaways with my episode with Joe just in a second. Joe, again, thank you for coming out. You're a trooper. It is now about 1:30?
1:30 in the morning. Yeah, exactly.
1:30. And for the audience, you don't realize that this episode was recording over about an hour long now, but we had to do multiple breaks because my son kept leaving his room. So there's editing to be done / has been done. Anyway, folks, Joe, again, thanks for coming out. Thanks for being a trooper. And audience, stick by, and I'll have my key takeaways from today's episode.
Thank you, Scott.
Take care. Hey, right. I hope you enjoyed that interview there with Joe Dodds. It was a great time, a lot of fun, with the minor exception of my son constantly waking up for some unknown reason. But such is life, right? Especially for all of you parents out there listening, you know the trials and tribulations of parenting. Anyway, just a couple key takeaways from today's episode with Joe. And the first one is treat everybody how they would be wanting to be treated, vice how you would want to be treated. And it was a very interesting concept. I've never even heard of that one before, but if you think about it, it makes absolute sense, right? Because how I want to be treated is totally different than how you want to be treated. I want clear direction. I want guidelines, arcs, and then I want to be left alone to do whatever task has been given to me. And it's not because I'm not engaged with my organization. Actually, it's the complete opposite. I want to have the complete freedom to go ahead, know what it is I'm supposed to achieve, what my guidelines are, and then I want to have the complete freedom to go ahead and achieve it within how I want to achieve it. Other people, they need very strict guidelines. They need completely closed arcs. They need to be constantly following up and so on and so forth. So just keep that in mind. Everybody is different. And if you go back to talking, oh God, I forget the episode number now, but the Strengths Finder episode with Terrence Hughes, and it's very similar, right? Enabling people within their strengths, or, you know, just talking to them how they want to be talked to, how they want to be treated, and so on and so forth. It's all interconnected, right? So keep that in mind when you're dealing with your people on a day-to-day basis, and maybe even have those open and frank conversations. Like, you know, how do you want to be treated? Seriously, think about it. Do you know how you want to be treated? You probably do, but how do you know how you can communicate that? That's the kicker right there. And the next key takeaway I got for you, enabling everybody to drive engagement, because it is a complete organization push. Everybody needs to be engaged from the top to the bottom, the left to the right, the inside, the outside. You want the complete organization to be driving employee engagement. Everybody should be engaged. So that's the final key takeaway right there I got from today with Joe. Thank you for listening. As a side note, which I meant to actually talk about in the intro, I was actually on Joe's podcast, the Power to Live More podcast, where we talk about productivity and how I go about doing my daily business and different tools I use and things such as those natures. So if you're interested in that, the link to that episode on Joe's podcast is actually in the show notes. And if you want to grab the show notes, again, it's super easy. It's just movingforwardleadership.com/5353. And I do that with every episode. So every episode is just simply movingforwardleadership/ whatever the episode number is, and you'll go right to the show notes for the episode. Okay, folks? I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you want to reach out to Joe, her contact info is in the show notes again. And finally, you know, if this touched you, remember R², S². Rate and review the show. Give it a 5-star rating there on iTunes, Google Play Music, whatever you use for your podcast app or service. And rate a review saying, hey, this is a great show. I'm learning lots. More leaders need to listen to what Scott and his audience, or Scott and his guests, I should say, have to say. And then, share. S². Share it. Share it with someone who you think could use this episode, could learn from these things. I share podcasts with my friends daily. I'm like, hey, so-and-so, you know what? You could listen to this episode. You got some fitness goals? Boom. I fire a great fitness, podcast episode their way. You know, you got some productivity things you say you're working on, and I just listened to a great podcast. Boom. There it is. You got some life troubles? I fire it to a different friend. All right. I do it daily. I'm constantly sharing podcasts to reach out and, you know, touch people's lives. So if this you think would help someone that you know, do the exact same thing. Share it to them. And you never know. You might just help their life. And finally, subscribe. Subscribe to the show so you don't miss another episode if you haven't listened to all 53 already. And you can do that very simply by going movingforwardleadership.com/subscribe. And you'll see the various ways you can subscribe to the show there, whether it's iTunes, Google Play Music, any Android app, or simply, if you're old school, an RSS feed. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for today. I hope you are doing well. I hope you have a great week. And until next time, keep pushing, keep trying, keep moving forward. Take care now.